What are you doing?
Nothing. Hey everyone, another fine day to prevent myself from becoming a Zelda channel. I'm your host, StunzuGND, and today we are going to try and do the impossible. Power scale the Archie Sonic universe. Before we start, let's make a little bet. Who's most likely to crucify me for this? Seth the programmer? No, he's a little too big for me. Our pal Steven? Well, no, he helped me make this video. Or maybe, since it's Sonic related, it's the most likely to be Juice to Magical. Oh god. Well, not much I can do about that now. Let's get started, shall we? Before we get into the actual power scaling aspect of the video, it's important to know, for those of you who don't, what the Archie Sonic universe is. It began as a continuation of the Sonic Sat-Am cartoon, but quickly began to incorporate material from the games as well as its own unique characters and concepts. For me and many others, this was the definitive version of Sonic in his universe, even more so than the games version. The Archie Sonic universe truly was something special for the franchise. But then legal trouble happened with a former writer and they had to reboot and sales dropped, and now the comic license belongs to IDW, unfortunately. It's hard to say if they'll ever be able to recapture what the Archie Sonic universe had, but I honestly find it doubtful. Another thing I need to stress immediately is that this power scaling video is strictly within verse. I'm not going to come out and tell you that Sonic could beat Goku, or that Shadow slept with Superman's mom or anything, but if you'd like to interpret it that way, you're welcome to. Just that last one is kinda weird. With all that out of the way, let's actually get started, shall we? When it comes to power scaling, most other series have a character that they use as a benchmark to gauge everyone else off of. For this video, I will be using Sonic the Hedgehog as our benchmark character, because he's the main character and understandably has the highest number of feats to go off of. Plus, it isn't like Sonic's a weak character, he's one of the strongest in his universe, which is a good place to bounce everyone else off of. Archie's Sonic is also easily more powerful than the version from the games, so things may get a bit into the realm of oddity every now and then, especially concerning the older issues of the comic. When you think of Sonic, you think speed, so why not start there? In one of these earlier issues, you can see that Sonic, breaking his limits, is able to run so fast that the rest of time is completely stopped, and remains that way for the duration of Sonic running. In a more recent issue, the crossover with Mega Man in Worlds Collide, Sonic is seen fighting a character who is capable of not just slowing time, as he states, but being able to stop it completely. You can also see that Sonic isn't even fazed by this, casually outrunning time itself. You could argue that this was due to the amps provided by his roboticized status, but even in base he wouldn't be that far off, if still not capable of doing so with little to no strain. This means that Sonic in his base form is significantly faster than the speed of light, though this is inconsistent. Something less recent than the Time Stopper feat, but way more consistent, is in Sonic the Hedgehog number 175, where he ran across the continent in seconds. This is calculated to mean he reached about Mach 517, which isn't slow by any means. His combat speed is something to note, as he does get consistently tagged by characters who shouldn't be able to move nearly as fast as him. We would also have to account for Sonic's cockiness and his tendency to hold way back because of it. In serious cases, he's shown keeping pace with characters who are said to be on his tier of speed in direct combat. Sonic's durability will keep it short and sweet. It's been confirmed that Sonic has absorbed so many rings over the years that he can take a lot more punishment than the average Mobian, which happens a lot in the Archie comics. The durability feat that stands out the most for Sonic is when he was launched 1 million light years across a zone, and a zone is about the size of a universe according to statements made. While this has more to do with speed than durability, it's also been shown that Sonic can vibrate his molecules so fast he can phase through solid objects, a la the Flash. Just throwing that out there. In terms of fighting power, Sonic really doesn't do anything special. He punches, he kicks, and he spin dashes. But there is one feat in particular regarding Sonic's power in base form I would like to discuss. Let's look at issue 125. The Quantum Dial, a planet-busting device made by an alien race called the Zorda, would be able to create a black hole that could absorb a star system. A standard black hole could at least devour our solar system, mind you. Here, Sonic mentions that he could generate enough energy through his speed to overcome a black hole generator. It's clear via his character that Sonic wouldn't lie about this in the moment, as he'd be willing to try and do anything to save everyone. Then there's Rotor, the smartest member of the Freedom Fighters aside from maybe Tails and Nicole, who doesn't even question that Sonic could do such a thing. This would imply that over time, Sonic could build up enough speed to be solar system level in his base form on speed alone. Does it make sense? No, it really doesn't. But is it viable? According to the lore, it has to be. From this point on, there's not much I can say about Sonic without delving into Super Sonic, who I don't want to cover until later. I think with this, we can get a viable idea of what Sonic's capable of, and can start moving on to other characters based on his strength. I'll start us off with characters who are clearly below Sonic's level. The other Freedom Fighters, for instance. Really what it boils down to are the fact that Sally, Antoine, Amy, Tails, and Rotor are just regular fighting Mobians with the occasional gadget or weapon. Tails can fly though. Bunny is great too and a very competent character, but hasn't shown enough for me to consistently put her on Sonic's level, since it should be noted she isn't even fully roboticized. This applies to the Chaotix too, even with Mighty being closer than Bunny. There is one exception to that though. All in all, any fights Sonic has with characters like these over the course of the run can be chalked up to Sonic holding back, or to writing inconsistency, with the former being more likely. But who's the exception I mentioned before? None other than the guardian of the Master Emerald himself, Knuckles the Echidna. For some reason, there's this massive misconception that Knuckles is a weak character. In terms of the Archie Sonic continuity, Knuckles is actually one of the strongest. In fact, Knuckles was actually a really important character in the Archie continuity. He even had his own spin-off comic back in the day that contributed a lot of world building and lore to the universe. But all that aside, Knuckles is without a doubt on Sonic's level, if not just slightly below it. Back in the day, Knuckles and Sonic clashed a lot before becoming friends later on in the run. Here we can see that Sonic and Knuckles are capable of matching each other blow for blow, as well as being able to keep pace with each other. That's enough to show that Knuckles is comparable to Sonic, if not just slightly weaker. Knuckles is also strong enough in base form to trade blows with the third incarnation of Enerjack, whose power was limited only to his imagination and was essentially a demigod. More on him later though. Speaking of characters we'll get to later, when Sonic used his super form to fight against Knuckles' hyper form, they were exactly equal to each other. The fight didn't stop until the damage they were doing caused his zone to explode, knocking both of them out. This means that nothing short of a universal blow will take out Hyper Knuckles. Of course, this is an old feat, and Sonic and Knuckles have gotten a lot stronger since then. But even in more recent comics, the writers imply that Sonic and Knuckles are similar to each other in terms of strength. That's enough to convince me that Knuckles is at least comparable to Sonic, if not on his level. So far, we have evidence to suggest that Sonic and Knuckles are on the same level, or Sonic is slightly stronger. Now we can move into characters who I think are above Sonic in terms of power level. To start with, I can think of no one better than Scourge the Hedgehog, Sonic's evil twin from an alternate dimension. When Scourge was first introduced in Sonic the Hedgehog issue 11, he was known only as Anti-Sonic, a version of Sonic from a zone opposite to Mobius Prime in which the morality of every character was turned on its head, making this universe's Sonic, aka Anti-Sonic, the ultimate force of evil. He and the main Sonic clashed numerous times over the years, but the outcome usually was in Sonic's favor. The thing about them was, physically anyway, they were 100% equals because they were the same person when it came to everything but personality and history. That all changed though in Sonic the Hedgehog issue 160, where Anti-Sonic and Rouge broke into the Master Emerald's chamber on Angel Island. Whilst there, Anti-Sonic absorbed some of the Master Emerald's power and changed forever. His outward appearance became a palette swap of Sonic's, and he changed his name to Scourge in order to better represent that he'd become more than just Sonic's evil twin. This power-up also came with a massive power boost, as you can imagine. Naturally, the first thing Scourge does with his power boost is go after Sonic, who happens to be with Shadow at the moment. Right away, we see that Scourge's feats have greatly improved. First off, the writers make it clear that Scourge has surpassed Sonic, and now lays on a tier where he gives Shadow a serious run for his money. Scourge even fights both of them for a while, but is clearly exhausted by this and can't do it for long. And then Scourge skedaddles out of there and meets with Dr. Fintivus, who offers him a team-up that is in no way important and you will definitely not hear me talk about again. Wink wink, nudge nudge. Anyway, Scourge shows up again a couple issues later and beats up Sonic just so the writers can really drive home that Scourge is stronger than him now, and steals his girlfriend and stuff. next thing Scourge does is go back to his universe and take over the entire world by force to become king, by himself. This world is a direct reflection of Sonic's, meaning it has everyone on it from Sonic's, with a few exceptions, that are at their exact same power levels. This in itself is impressive, but then he decides one world isn't enough, and goes to take over Sonic's, and nothing was really stopping him until the Freedom Fighters and Suppression Squad teamed up on him while he was fighting Sonic. Even after that, he turned Super, which we'll get into later like always, and even after he was beaten and taken to the No Zone, he led a massive prison break where he kicked the shite out of several super criminals from all across the multiverse, as well as countless Zone cops who are trained to take on said multi-dimensional super criminals. Yeah, if there's any one takeaway from this video, I hope it's that Scourge is one tough cookie. Okay, so now we have justification that Scourge is stronger than Sonic and Knuckles, but it just keeps going. So, who's stronger than Scourge? Why, the ultimate life form, Shadow the Hedgehog. In the Archie continuity, Shadow is a very fierce contender, even if I do feel like the writers have made an effort to depower him somewhat. I'll skip the formalities because if you're watching this video, chances are you know who Shadow is. Created by Gerald Robotnik, Ultimate Life Form, etc, etc. Shadow is the only character where I will actually be using feats from the games, as both Sonic Adventure titles are canon to the Archie continuity. Canonically, this is Shadow's first appearance, as well as the evidence for why he's stronger than Sonic. In their first encounter on Prison Island, I estimate Shadow and Sonic were about the same in power. Both of them were pantsing heavily after the fight, but by the time they fought again on Space Colony Arc, I'd say Shadow had taken the lead in terms of power. This is supported by the comics, where we can see in this flashback from Sonic Universe 2 that Shadow did have the upper hand on Sonic before the fight was interrupted. Sonic's gotten a lot stronger since then, but then again, so has Shadow. As for Scourge, we know that he and Shadow were near equals on their first encounter. However, this was likely because Shadow had never met Scourge before and was caught off guard by a character close in power to his own, which isn't exactly common. We see by the end of the fight, once Shadow has gotten serious, Scourge makes his getaway. We see Rouge warning him that Shadow's angry and that's bad news for them, and Scourge doesn't disagree with her. For him to run away when he could have won a fight is vastly out of character for Scourge, which tells me he couldn't have. Scourge also confirms in his next fight with Sonic that Shadow was the reason Scourge lost their first encounter. Yes, this is older evidence, but even recently when Scourge and Shadow met, Scourge sounded apprehensive at the idea of fighting Shadow. While Chaos Control is what really makes him powerful, Shadow's top feat comes from when he was able to briefly, with the help of Omega and Rouge, contend with Feist, ruler of the Special Zone who is nigh omnipotent when in it. Feist also had turned off Shadow's ability to use Chaos Control while doing this. All in all, Shadow is a very powerful character in the Archie Comics, and Chaos Control abilities are no joke. In the comics, Shadow can even use them without an emerald in hand, which makes him extra dangerous. What's more, if he takes off his inhibitor rings that keep his power restrained, he can fully cut loose with everything he's got, and that's truly devastating. Where Shadow falters and why he never defeats the main villain in a snap is because, like Vegeta in Dragon Ball, he's often used as a measuring stick to show just how powerful a threat usually is. Shadow often will fight and lose to an enemy as an easy way for the writers to show that the stakes are very, very high, which really is a compliment to Shadow's power if you think about it. All that said, there's someone who stands even higher than Shadow. Introducing Enerjack, the Chaos Demigod. The story of Enerjack is a complicated one, and one that I don't really have time for in this video, so I'll keep it brief. Enerjack is a dark chaos entity that is capable of possessing members of the Echidna race to use as a host body. So far, we have evidence that this has occurred at least 4, technically 5 times, with the third Dimitri and the fourth Knuckles being the most prominent. In all forms, Enerjack is stated to be a being without clear limits, and that his power is limited completely to the imagination of the Avatar. When Dimitri was the host of Enerjack, he explains to Knuckles after teleporting them both from the moon to the deep sea that he could do anything with a mere thought. Along with instant teleportation, Dimitri's Enerjack also displayed the ability to degenerate Knuckles by the atom with just a thought. When Mammoth Mogul used the Sword of Acorns to absorb Dimitri Jack's powers, he transformed into Master Mogul, a being capable of crushing multiverses with his hands. So already Dimitri's Enerjack is looking fantastically powerful. What if I told you the Knuckles version was even stronger? To start, Knuckles achieved the state called Chaos Knuckles in the exact same way Dimitri became Enerjack. Chaos Knuckles was comparable to Enerjack from the beginning, which is further confirmed when Mogul uses Chaos Knuckles' power to turn into Master Mogul a second time, implying that Chaos Knuckles had the same strength as Dimitri Jack. When Dr. Fintivus was transforming Knuckles into Enerjack, he tells him that he can help Knuckles achieve that power again, only stronger and more controlled. This means Ener Knuckles is stronger than Dimitri Jack by nature. He displays the same ability to degenerate things by the atoms, teleport, and levitate things using chaos energy. But the Knuckles incarnation is even capable of manipulating chaos energy in ways we've only seen Shadow do, making him even more dangerous. Sonic couldn't lay a finger on him, Scourge was terrified of him, and the only one who could do any lasting damage was Shadow, after he removed his inhibitor rings and used Chaos Blast, his strongest attack. After that, Shadow was toast and Enerjack was barely scathed. This is the monster that Fintivus used Scourge and other villains as bait to create. He turned Knuckles into the ultimate conduit of Enerjack, the likes of which the Archie continuity had never seen before. A nigh-omnipotent multiversal being who seemed unbeatable, beyond Scourge and even Shadow. So how did the Freedom Fighters overcome this one? Well, it was a combination of things, but the most prominent being the appearance of one Super Sonic. Super Sonic is obviously a transformation of Sonic's achieved when he absorbed energy from all 7 Chaos Emeralds, or in this case, the Master Emerald. The Supersonic feats I will be covering focus mostly on his fight with Ener Knuckles, since that's the cliffhanger I just left you on, and the most recent appearance of it unless you count Genesis, which I don't. All he did with his super form in Genesis was overcome the power of the Super Genesis wave and warp reality back to the way it was before, essentially pulling a Flashpoint, but in reverse. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. Back to Super Sonic vs. Ener Knuckles. First, his durability is way better. He's taking attacks straight from Enerjack, full on, and is completely unharmed. Super Sonic states that he's invincible, and the fact that Enerjack, who is a multiversal figure, can't seem to hurt him seems to support that. Plus, if Enerjack is beyond universal, we can assume Super Sonic's durability has increased tenfold since he got taken out by a universal explosion. Not only does he take powerful blasts and punches like nothing, but getting degenerated and regenerated elsewhere didn't seem to slow him down one bit. His attack potency is way up too, since he was doing a lot more damage to Enerjack than Enerjack was doing to him. In fact, Super Sonic appeared to be stopping Enerjack the entire fight. This may not seem like much, but it actually speaks volumes to the power of Super Sonic considering what we know about Enerjack. The fight didn't last very long in the comic, but it's described as the biggest clash of superpowers Mobius had ever seen, and I believe it. The fact that destruction of the area was so minimal only attests to the fact that Sonic was in control of the fight the entire time, which puts him on a whole new level. Some other accolades of Super Sonic include a defeat over Perfect Chaos, the Bio-Lizard with help from Shadow, and a tussle with a robot called Adam. Each time the supersonic state is called upon, our titular hedgehog displays a fantastic amount of power that few can surpass. However, it is possible. Sonic is the only one who can turn super after all. Following our theme, let's look at Super Scourge. Like Super Sonic, Super Scourge is a transformation of Scourge that manifests when the evil king has gathered enough chaos energy. In the comic where Super Scourge appears, Sonic the Hedgehog number 195, he does this using Anarchy Burial, the anti-Mobius version of the Chaos Emeralds. Unlike Super Sonic, however, Super Scourge only appears one time in Sonic the Hedgehog number 196, meaning everything I discuss will be coming from that issue. However, he gets a lot done in that span of time. First, let's zoom in on that photo a little. There we go. Yep, you're seeing that right. He beat all of those guys single-handedly. Yes, that's Sonic and Shadow both defeated, and yes, they were fighting together. So what, you're wondering? Enerjack did the same thing. But then you realize that it wasn't just Sonic and Shadow, and others were there also. Silver, who's right up there with the two hedgehogs, Metal Sonic, who depending on the model is strong enough to give Shadow a challenge, this one was that one, and Rob-O, along with Rosie and Amy, who aren't too impressive but aren't pushovers either. And by the looks of it, Super Scourge wasn't phased a bit. In fact, he looks completely fine and energized.
damn. He then proceeds to beat up the fodder like Madara through the 4th Division while the others wake it back up. They totally would have had a better fighting chance too if Metal Sonic hadn't picked a fight and Shadow had to piece them both out to take care of it. So then Silver catches Super Scourge in his telekinesis powers, and they shoot lasers at him, which don't appear to work, before he busts out of Silver's grasp, which no one before him was able to do. They decide to try and dogpile him, which only causes him to explode with power, showering everyone off just to show how invincible he truly is. He keeps fighting everyone, not tired or injured yet, and is completely decimating them. The only reason they win in the end is because Sonic tricks Scourge into reverting back to his base form where he would be out of energy. So physically, they didn't even beat Super Scourge. Without access to super forms themselves, I highly doubt they could have. Speaking of, there's this line where Miles implies that if they got the 7 Chaos Emeralds and Sonic turned super, they could be able to defeat Scourge. This line can be taken a couple ways, but I'll share with you my take. I think Miles means that Super Sonic is the only way they could have had someone who could contend with Super Scourge, rather than Super Sonic being stronger than him. I think of the super form like the Super Saiyan transformation it's based on, where the multiplier is the same, but it's the character's base form strength is what sets them ahead. Which is a shame because Super Sonic vs Super Scourge would have been a super cool fight to see. We never did get to see it though. Of course, this is never officially stated, so I just put Super Scourge as greater than or equal to Sonic. Following that trend, I'm sure you guessed who's coming next. That's right, it's Super Shadow. For the scope of this analysis, Super Shadow is going to be a lot of hypothetical because he only appears twice, 3 times if you count the Final Hazard flashback in the Archie Comics run, and barely does anything both times. First, we know for a fact, since Sonic Adventure 2 is canon, and they actually show this part of the flashbacks, that Super Shadow, with the help of Super Sonic, managed to vanquish the Final Hazard and save Mobius. However, because he had 0 experience with the transformation beforehand, he reverted to his base form and plummeted towards Earth, presumed dead. Funny enough, the next time we see him in continuity is the first time we get to see Super Shadow used in full. We see that Shadow didn't burn up in Mobius' atmosphere, and is rescued by an alien race called the Ben, who revived him. After nursing him back to health, they powered Shadow up into his super form in order to fight the Zorda warship that was approaching so that they could escape. Shadow monologues for a bit and then gets one-shotted immediately. This was Shadow's first full appearance in the comic, as well as the first instance of him getting jobbed by the writers to show how tough the impending threat is about to be. The goal here wasn't to make Shadow look weak to me. It was a ploy to make the Zorda look strong. Why else would they include this bit with Super Shadow in the first place? In continuity, it's agreed on by fans of the comic that the reason Super Shadow was defeated by the Zorda so easily is because he literally just got revived by the Bem, was likely still weakened. Last thing he remembered, he just fought the Final Hazard, which probably rattled him to be suddenly thrust into something else, and he was just generally unprepared to fight them. He had no idea what he was up against, assuming Chaos Control would be enough. We see quickly that he thought wrong and was sent to Mobius in order to help the Freedom Fighters fight the Zorda off. The next time we see Super Shadow, he does one thing. When Super Sonic is fighting Adam, that event I mentioned before, Shadow is powered up into his super state in order to use his now even further enhanced connection to Chaos Control to pull all of the Chaos Emeralds from across the universe and rip open a hole to another zone and send the Emeralds there in order to stop Adam's plan. That's the last we see of Shadow's super form in the original continuity. He's implied to have done more with it in the post-Genesis community, but that's outside of the scope of this analysis. Thanks, Ken! Anyway, Super Shadow's feats aren't all that impressive next to Super Sonic and Super Scourge, but if we're working with that base power plus multiplier idea in mind, Super Shadow should outshine both of them. I think the writers use this theory too, especially since Super Shadow is implied to be stronger than Super Sonic just like their base states, and literally everything else. I'm sure if we asked Ian Flynn right now who was stronger, he'd agree with me. The reason Shadow's feats are awful is because, like I discussed before, Shadow is being used as a plot device. The reader knows that he's powerful, so if the big bad defeats him, that makes them look even more intimidating. Plus, if Shadow was actually allowed to fight for real in his super form, it would probably be boring because he'd win in a snap. Plus, that leaves very little for Sonic to do, and the comics demand that he's the main focus of the series at all times. This is why they created the Sonic Universe spin-off later on to show what other characters were up to when they were not on screen, which Shadow was actually featured heavily in. Unfortunately, we never got to see him turn super and fight any epic fights there either. Following this logic, the Superform power scale ends up looking nearly identical to the base form version, Shadow being the strongest, followed by Scourge, then Sonic. The next characters I'm going to address I'm doing out of obligation since I sort of addressed them already, and they provide a neat little segue into the character after them. This section will be a little longer than the other ones because I need to do a lot more explaining, but it'll also be less structured, so bear with me. Introducing to you King Sonic and King Shadow from 30 years into the future. Did you know the Archie Sonic comics have like 18 quintillion possible futures? The four most prominent are the two versions of Light Mobius, which we're about to talk about now, Dark Mobius, and whatever post-apocalyptic future Silver comes from. Out of these four, Light Mobius version 1 is the most bright looking. Set 25 years in the future from the main continuity, Sonic and Sally have since married and become the king and queen of Kingdom Acorn. They've got a couple kids too. Knuckles and Jalisu got together and had their daughter, and then Tails got together with Mina for some reason, and they had some kids. Eggman was defeated and nothing seemed to be going wrong. Basically, everyone was together in the future, and it was just a joyous time, and everything was happy. Then Knuckles told Sonic that some of their previous battles have been slowly breaking the space-time continuum, so they have to go back in time and fix it before the world blows up. So Sonic obliges and goes back in time to alter history because he's a nice guy, but when saving the world, he greatly affected the timeline. This brings us to Light Mobius version 2. Whatever Sonic did to change the timeline made it so that he disappeared sometime during the Second Robotnik War, and thus the world greatly suffered for it. That is until Shadow surfaced after his 50 years of suspended animation. This version of Shadow never met Sonic, and thus never turned over a new leaf and became a sort of good guy. That means this Shadow was very much cold-hearted and merciless. But wouldn't that also mean that Sonic wasn't around to drive the plot of Sonic Adventure 2, and Shadow wouldn't have turned good and stopped the final hazard? How is everyone here right now? Whatever, we're not supposed to think about it. Shadow led a regime that took over Mobius by force and placed very strict laws and rules upon all of his citizens, essentially taking the role of king like any good fascist dictator would. Except, technically it was still a monarchy, but that's clearly the symbolism they were going for. He married Sally for political reasons and mellowed out some, but not much. Shadow succeeded in bringing order to the world, but he was pretty tyrannical, and thus this future was a lot less happy and ideal than the other one. For some reason, Knuckles' daughter Lara Sue was able to remember the old timeline and went out to correct it. With the help of future Tails, Lara Sue tracked down Sonic, who was living as a hobo on the streets. As hilarious as this is, I can't help but wonder how Sonic was still around if he was literally erased from the timeline years ago. That's another missing piece. Okay, which of you five are at fault here? Poor Sonic. That's just time travel for you. Moving on from that corny joke, they team up with future Knuckles and manage to defeat Shadow. Sonic and Sally rekindle their romance, marry, let up on some of the stricter policies, and everything pretty much goes back to the way it was in the first timeline, except Shadow's a dick now or something. He kinda got a raw deal in all of this, since he was probably a cool dude in the first timeline. But they needed a villain, so we erased Shadow's development. Anyway, these characters are a bit harder to gauge on the power scale. While there has been 25 years for both characters to grow power-wise, I don't think they ever surpassed their younger selves' super forms. King Sonic was living in an era of peace, sure, but it's implied that it was hard fought over the 25 years separating him from his main timeline counterpart. Thus, we can assume this Sonic has grown in power from his present self, and without a doubt has more experience. How much he grew in power, though, is hard to say. Sonic and Sally's kids are 12, and I doubt they were born during the fighting, so that means that there was fighting on Mobius for at least 13 or 14 years post our current timeline. This means that King Sonic is likely superior to his younger self, but we can't determine exactly how much. King Shadow claims that Sonic has aged past his physical prime, but his actions don't seem to suggest that he's slowed down any. Plus, this doesn't mean King Sonic is weaker than present Sonic. Present Sonic was 17 and King Sonic is 42. That means we never saw his late 20s to early 30s, when his physical prime would have been. King Shadow is a little easier to wrap our heads around. He states when he fights Sonic that as the ultimate life form, he never ages. Thus, he's still in his physical prime at the time of being king. He also managed to take over the world, which isn't too impressive since it can be assumed anyone above Scourge's strength could do, but still noteworthy enough to include. This version of Shadow also never possessed the morals of his present-day counterpart, meaning that he fought a lot more dirty and brutal. He was also shown using his Chaos control abilities a lot more freely than he did in the present. This is likely because he's more practiced and developed with them here. A 42-year-old Sonic couldn't phase him with a single hit, and Shadow made quick work of him in only a couple of attacks, to the point where Sonic was completely down for the count before King Shadow's cape even hit the ground. He was only defeated when Knuckles' daughter Lara Sue, used Chaos Control against him and put him into paralysis. Lara Sue is 21, and I doubt that Knuckles started training her with it right away. So she managed to defeat a character with his own power that he'd been using for over 30 years, and was naturally the most in tune with said power, as Locke himself, Lara Sue's grandfather, discovered, simply because she was somehow better than him at it. I'm going off on a tangent. Evidence is there to suggest that King Shadow is more powerful than his present-day self, and exceptionally more dangerous. Both characters are likely more powerful here than they were in the current timeline, but placing them in comparison to others gets a little rocky. I do think that future Shadow could potentially have beaten Enter Knuckles, but not without a very hard fight. I put King Sonic between Shadow and Enter Jack, while I put King Shadow just a tad bit over Enter Jack. Okay, so we got both versions of Light Mobius out of the way, but what about the other futures? Well, Dark Mobius might be home to one of the single most powerful characters in the Archie continuity, if not the single most powerful. We've seen him before, but never like this. Dark Mobius is named for its one overlord, the future version of Enter Jack. Dark Enter Jack is the fifth, although technically fourth incarnation of Enter Jack since it's still Knuckles. We don't know much about what went on in this timeline prior to Silver visiting it in Sonic Universe 25, but what we do know for certain is that Knuckles became Enter Jack again at some point between the current timeline and now. We know that he must have been the same age as his 25 years later counterpart, because Lara Sue is born and the same age, and it's pretty clear that he took over his entire zone. We're clued into this because the entire world looks post-apocalyptic and literally everyone, save for Lara Sue and a few other rebels, had their souls stolen and imprisoned by Enter Jack. Right from the get-go, we know that this Enter Jack is far stronger than anyone we've ever seen. First off, he defeated the future incarnations of everyone in battle and stole their souls. This is everyone on the planet, including King Sonic and King Shadow. Plus Lara Sue, who is more powerful than King Shadow, was alive but hadn't managed to beat him yet and clearly could not overpower him. During his fight with Silver, Enter Jack confirms that he did indeed defeat Super Sonic in battle, which was not just Super Sonic, but a hypothetical King Super Sonic. It can also be assumed he defeated a King Super Shadow too, because Shadow was defeated, and if the Chaos Emerald / Master Emerald were just sitting there around after Super Sonic got defeated, then Shadow probably wouldn't have just not used them. Enter Jack goes on to fight Silver for about 3 issues straight in this 4-issue arc, but is clearly dominating the battle, to the point where eventually, Silver and Lara Sue are the last people alive. In the final issue of the arc, Silver figures out, like our good friend Mr. Incredible, that the only thing that could hurt Enter Jack was himself. Silver changed tactics and began using his psychokinesis to turn Enter Jack's attacks back on him, which yielded immediate results. However, this isn't even what stopped him in the end. Lara Sue had to use the Sword of Acorns to absorb and depower Enter Jack completely to win. I think she absorbed too much. He's not looking so good. But that considered, Dark Enter Jack was a monster. Nobody on this list so far could have stopped him, and without the Sword of Acorns, I'm not sure Lara Sue or Silver could have in the end either. Speaking of Silver, there's a reason I haven't talked about him in depth yet. Through making this video, I've come to a conclusion about Archie Silver that I never fully realized before. In terms of his power, he's the hardest character to power scale. Seriously, Silver the Hedgehog is all over the place in these comics. You could say, it's no use. Ah, no. Okay, sorry. That's not to say I don't like the Archie Comics version of Silver. He's still a great character and gets some hefty development between his first and last appearance. And the Silver Saga was one of my favorite Sonic Universe arcs, but I couldn't place him compared to others in this video to save my life. The first time we see Silver in the Archie Comics, he's capable of using his powers to capture Sonic, Scourge, Shadow, Metal Sonic, Amy, Rob, and Rosie. At that point, I might argue that he's the strongest in the room. Cool introduction for a new character. Then once Scourge turned Super, we see that he was one of the victims who got beaten while all of them were trying to fight Super Scourge. This is fine, it makes sense. But then suddenly when we see him again, he's able to go toe-to-toe with Dark Enerjack? Of course, Silver wasn't able to actually hurt him until he changed tactics, but still, he was able to keep up with and fight him for a pretty long time before that. That's a huge power leap, but I can deal with it. What I can't deal with is the fact that later he's getting dragged around by base form Sonic and is hardly able to restrain him. Now he's gone backwards? I understand that he probably wasn't going all out on Sonic, but it still makes little sense. I mean, I guess because Silver is a time traveler, he could be training as much as he wanted between appearances, and there's even a chance we might not be seeing his personal timeline in order, which just cements the idea that we can't conclusively place him anywhere. Silver seems to be as strong as the plot demands. Hey guys, thanks for sticking with it this far. This video's run long enough, but I had a lot of fun making it. There's a lot of characters that I didn't actually get to in this video, like Blaze or Mammoth Mogul or Ixis Nagus or even Larasu, so if you're all interested, I could totally make a part 2. I was actually surprised by how much I enjoyed making this video. The Archie Sonic comics were something I loved from my childhood, and I found that I also loved going back and talking about them since I hadn't really thought about them in 4 or 5 years. I love to go more in depth on them and the storylines, especially since I think they've really got something special, and not many people get to see this side of Sonic, so I'll definitely make more videos relating to this universe in the future. Great, now I've gone from being a Zelda channel to an Archie Sonic channel. Hey, if I did this correctly, I uploaded on June 23rd, which is Sonic's birthday. Nice timing, me! Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It took me a lot of time to make, but it was actually a joy to do. Up, and away. Peace out.